Good morning, everybody. This is my warm-up. I'm changing the format a little bit. This is going to be, this is warm-up 163. I'm not going to date them anymore. I'm just going to go by numbers. You'll learn more about that while I'm doing it later. Anyways, today's a serious, I think all my warm-ups I tend to think that they're important because they're about mindset, but today I'm talking about something different. I'm going to start it off by saying this. I have zero tolerance for racism. Zero tolerance for racism. And I say that because the other day I watched a Facebook Live with Brene Brown, and she was talking about unpacking, white privilege. And I watched that, and you guys, I've watched it now, 20 times. And it had an impact on me. And I'm naive, right? So here I am, a 53-year-old white male, and I'm naive in a couple different ways, and it was really enlightening, and I learned a lot. But the reason why I'm doing this today is because she talked in that video about 3 Ps: privilege, perspective, and power. And what I'm going to ask all of you that are watching this warm-up is that it's a must that you watch that. And I want you to really think, as she talks and you listen, I want you to identify where you are. I want you to see if anything that she says resonates with you. Maybe you watch it and you get really upset. Maybe you don't agree with what she says. But nonetheless, I want you to watch it. And here's why. The other day, I was on the Ron and Don podcast with Don O'Neill and Ron Upshaw, and Don O'Neill said at the beginning of the podcast, he says he's waking up every morning like we're in a revolution, like we're having the ability to rewrite history, and we are. And we live right now in a world where there's not equality. We live in a world right now where there are people that are oppressed, and we have racism, systemic racism. And here I am, how's a 53-year-old white guy talking to you about this? And here's what I know. We were at the dinner table the other night with my kids, and I have to tell you that hatred and racism is learned. I was born in El Paso, Texas, and I had a grandparent on my mother's side who was horribly racist. And he would say things that I wouldn't understand as a young child, and I would ask my parents about it, and they said, well, what he says is wrong. And I was lucky enough to have parents who chose to have a different view on life and a different view on how we interacted, and that was taught to me. And it's my responsibility now as a parent to do the same thing. And so as I watched this video that Brene put out there, and the other part of me being naive is I said, wow, this is so timely. And somebody told me, Mike, that was recorded in 2017. You guys, 2017, and look where we are today. And so here's what I learned from it. The first one is privilege, and if people get upset, if you're saying, oh my gosh, here's this privilege talk again, here's what I know is, privilege isn't about how you worked so hard and you earned it, and a lot of people will have that argument. There's what's called unearned privilege, and here I'll give you what unearned privilege is. The other night, my 17-year-old son went to the Black Lives Matter protest in downtown Seattle. When he left the house, no way, shape, or form did I have a worry about him being beat up, being detained, or possibly being killed. You know why? Because of the color of his skin. Brene says this, you can go to a grocery store right now and I can find a Band-Aid that matches my skin color. You guys, that is unearned privilege. It's based on the color of my skin. When I get pulled over for a traffic ticket, which doesn't happen very often, but when it does, I'm not sitting in my car worrying about the fact that I could be pulled out of my car, beaten possibly, and maybe killed. White privilege. The other one is perspective. Here's what I will tell you is that you see the world through the lens that you have been trained to see it with, what you have learned, what you have been taught, what has been modeled for you. Just as I had that incredibly racist grandfather, but I had a different model, I have a different role. You guys, hatred and racism is learned. When we were sitting at the dinner table the other night with my kids, and both my kids said, how on earth can anybody think it's okay to take a life no matter what? and I had to think about that. I said, you're absolutely right. How do we have the power to say we can take a life, no matter what color their skin is, no matter what they did, no matter who they are? And then the last one is power. And, we teach this in some of our coaching. And in Ninja, we talk about there's 3 rules in life, right? There's 3 rules, or there's 3 types of ways you can live in life. There's a lose-lose life, which means that nobody wins, zero growth. There's a win-lose, which has a low percentage of being effective, right? Where somebody wins and somebody loses. And then there's win-win. And win-win is when we make a decision to have compassion, to take other people's perspective. So what does that mean, taking somebody else's perspective? Here's what it means. Is I watched that Brene Brown video, and I thought to myself, let me take somebody else's perspective. Let's say that the color of my skin was different, and I was sending my son down to the Black Lives Matters. My conversation with him would have been much different than, hey, son, make sure you have your phone on you. Call me if you need anything, and I'll see you when you get home. It would have been a very different conversation. And that's taking a different perspective. Don't all of us have the right to be equal? Don't we? Yes. So here's what I know. From watching that video, it made me say, you know what? We all have to get involved in this conversation. We all have to do something because, 2017, Brene Brown does that video, and look where we are today. You guys, we all have a responsibility. And here's what I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to end with this, is that if you watch this video, and you have to watch the Brene Brown video, and it resonates with you, then here's what I want you to ask yourself. That's great, but what are you doing, right? When we think about privilege, the fact that I can say, you know what, I know it's going on right now, but it doesn't affect me. You guys, that's unearned privilege. You get to decide if you want to be a part of it or not. We can't do that anymore. We all have to get involved. We all have to do something about it because it's not right, and we need to make a new story. And we need to make a new story by getting involved. So if you watched it and it resonated with you, then I would ask you, what are you doing? How are you being a voice? If you watch this and you watch the Brene Brown video and it upset you and you got angry and you don't agree with it, well, guess what? Now you know where you stand. Now you have perspective. Now take a different perspective and see what that feels like. See what it feels like to have your rights taken away from you. See what it feels like to not be equal. See what it feels like to live in that world. Right? That's what I'm talking about. So, and then the last one is we all have power collectively in a win-win scenario where we all work together to make this a better place for all of us to live equally. And, I know that I'm going to get some crazy comments on here, and that's okay. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to take your perspective and say, how can we compassionately have a conversation about this? How can we come to this with an open mind? How can we collectively work together? Because I truly believe in a win-win society where we can work together and we can figure out ways so that we all can be equal. All right, everybody, that's my warm-up for today. You guys, thanks for listening.